Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, there's definitely some deep-seated something in there. Ah,
Yes.
are you a
Yes.
Taurus or no? Just
No,
curious.
Gemini.
Oh, same. No wonder we get along so well.
I know.
Awesome.
I
So
know.
thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I was reading through your bio, which, I feel like we know each other well enough. I don't necessarily need that for us to have
Yeah.
this conversation, but you're really kind of a badass, and I'm excited to hear like how you got to where you got to now, because your education and your earlier years are not at all what you're doing now.
No, no. My life has been literally a stair step. It's like every chapter's been a preparation for the next part of my life. So I start looking at what I'm doing now and I'm like, damn, what am I gonna be doing like 10 years? This is super exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how does it come to you? Like where do these because I've been in the same career for 20, 9 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does it come to you like, hey, I think I want to do something new? And then how do you know when you find that thing?
It's funny. I am just not a person that resists change. Like I'm always very accepting of change. So things will happen along the way and I'll be like, "Oh, well maybe I should be doing that." Or, "Oh, well maybe I could go that route." And it's funny because I know a lot of people who have been in their careers, in their life doing, their thing, their one thing. And for me, my one thing is change. That's it. My one
Mm,
thing is change and helping other people, and those have been the consistent threads. And then I just have kind of followed where I needed to go next
yeah.
based on things that transpired at the time. So
Yeah. So you just sort of go with the flow ish.
I do, which drives a lot of people crazy.
Well, and see, and I feel like more people are like you and less like me because, in the entrepreneur world, it's always like, build up your business and sell it and now go do your next thing. And I'm like the one person who's like, wait, I don't want to sell it. I want to keep doing this. So I feel like people are more like you than like me.
I think regardless, the grass will always appear greener to the other side, right?
Mm,
So similarly, there are a lot of things in my life where if I had stayed in one thing for longer, maybe I would have developed a little more fully in that before I moved on to something else. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should have done more of that instead of leaving it. So believe me, there's a lot of second guess that happens that's like, oh, maybe I should have stayed where I was at. So
yeah. Yeah,
mhm.
but at least it keeps it like fun and exciting and lots of change. And you travel a lot. I thought I traveled a lot, but you travel more than I travel.
I think it's so funny. So last week when I was in Maine for my extended period of time, I was sitting at the bar at one of the restaurants that I love to eat at up there, and I was talking to this lovely woman who was having dinner. She was actually a flight attendant, and she just had an overnight in Portland. And we talked for 2 hours about life and about food and about her job and
Mm.
all those things. And the bill comes and she pays the check and the tab comes back and it had some of my food on there. They had kind of added my food to her bill. So I look at her check and I'm like, I started laughing and she's like, why are you laughing at me? And I said, it's nice to meet another Angela when I'm sitting at the bar, who is an avid traveler that we sat and had this lovely conversation for 2 hours. I had no idea what your name was, but it's the same as mine.
Oh, wow. Look at that. That's
So
amazing.
that being said, I think there's something to a name, my dear, and maybe that's why we all prefer to travel.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be we definitely got to create at Arate next month the Ange. We'll just leave it there.
Yes,
Shrine of me,
yes,
you and Angela Bradford. Yeah.
yes, yes. We definitely need to do that for
There's going
sure.
to be some power in that for sure.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So talk to me. You and I were at Ed's together, and it was sort of a whirlwind because there was a lot going on that day, and then it was around the holidays, so I don't think any of us had a lot of time to sort of process what had happened. And just recently you kind of replayed that through. Where did you get to on the other side of that?
It's funny. You're right. That day was a whirlwind. I felt so surreal over the course of that day, sitting in Ed's living room and listening to him give us kind of his tips and tricks and secrets on life, and then seeing all of you who were with me, and I knew most everyone a little bit, but not super well. And then to have us all sit there and be so vulnerable in front of each other was just a very magical day. And I did have the opportunity to sit down and watch my hot seat time with him, which was about 18 minutes worth of footage.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny, that day was so impactful for me when it happened. And then I just kind of like put it back here, you know, I didn't think about it until we got to Evolve. And then I was like, wow, like I really, what he said to me that day and believing in myself and the things that I needed to do to help other people, like I'm here, it's happening. Like I'm putting that work in. And it's just really surreal to go back after I got back from Evolve and then finally watch the footage and be like, wow, what a freaking day. And to connect with you and hear your amazing story and to just to share in that moment together was just so powerful for me.
Oh, I love that. And did your idea for Evolve spawn out of that, or you were already planning that?
Yeah, I was already planning it. It's funny. So last summer I've got a few clients that are a part of Arate, and you know, we would sit around and commiserate after the summit and then also after the live in Nashville and kind of talk about, we wish that there was something where we were kind of round tabling, you know, we were sitting there talking about our problems or talking about our issues and then being able to help each other to implement and put an implementation plan in place. And so my idea for Evolve came from that. Just because I felt like there was a little bit of a hole. I really enjoy, one of the things in my business with Valkyrie is that I enjoy helping people strategize on next steps in their business, or if they're struggling financially, or if they're trying to find sales somewhere, or they're trying to do marketing. Like I really enjoy helping people strategize and then finding a plan. And so that was really kind of where my concept for Evolve came. And then I had actually launched the sales for it and booked everything just before Ed's house, and I was having like horrible like imposter syndrome, like no other. Who's going to come to this event? Nobody's going to understand what it's about. You know, we're, you know, if people come, like I'm not going to have much of an impact. And you know, so I was having all of those like disbeliefs in myself and in what I had put together before coming to Ed's that day. And so that day really sort of helped to settle things out, even though things were already in motion.
Oh, I love that. And I feel like Evolve was a tremendous success. Like you guys did an awesome job.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, you know, talking to people after the week and listening to, I had a lot of phone calls the week after with just feedback on the event, but then also feedback of things that they were already implementing, stuff that was already happening. I mean, we had someone come to the event who sat in one of the relationship sessions, and he got home and immediately was told his girlfriend, post about us on social media. I told you for years not to do this because of my ex, but just do it, you know? And there were just, it's just even little things like that that came out of it that really impacted people's hearts. And that was amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah. Well, the education is good. My biggest thing that I learned was from you and our meeting and the financial planning one. It's been like the missing ingredient that I had but lost, but you reminded me that it's there, but you actually gave me the tool for implementation,
Good.
which is amazing. Um,
Good.
yeah. So I mean, and for me, my goal, I know every time I go to one of these, because there's always, you know, either usually both the expense as well as the time, that I'm like, if I'm going to go do this, I got to get an ROI on this. Like there has to be a tangible takeaway or something that's going to help my business. Like if we're spending the money and time, like there has to be something good. And I feel like I got so many of those from your event and what you provided and the relationships within that event as well.
Good, good. Yeah. And I've seen that you've had some of the folks that were there on your podcast already so far. So that's exciting. I just love to see the connections form and watch the relationships happen. It's so exciting for me.
Yeah, I love that. So you now, because I'm like, oh, so this is like what you do now. You're like this amazing like event like coordinator, planner, you put it all on. You're like, no, that's just something I do for fun. That's not my like real job. So
Yeah.
what right now you're working in implementation of this financial piece that I was talking about, or what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I actually have a few businesses. I own a couple of restaurants locally where I live, and I started the original one about 7 years ago, and it was a total mess and a financial fuck up. If you pardon my French, you can blurt me out if you want to. But at either rate, so that from 7 years to kind of today, I figured things out. I actually found Profit First, which the book is behind me, and I learned how to implement that in my own business. And then I also, because it made such a large financial impact for me, I have learned to teach other people how to implement it into their own businesses. And that particular component is what I focus on mostly now. So I have another business that helps businesses with cash flow management and strategizing on how to build sales, and also figure out how to be profitable and have your bottom line profit actually match your bank account, which is a very rare thing. And so I'm now fully focused on that. Although I still have the restaurants, I have an amazing leadership team in place for those. And then on top of the Profit First stuff, because I ended up having some money behind me, I could start investing in real estate. So I started investing in some multifamily real estate as well. So I focus most of my time between the multifamily real estate and the cash flow management partnership.
Yeah, I don't know how you balance all of that. Like, you know, do you time block like so many hours for each thing you're doing? Like how do you do that? Because for me, I'm just like all in on what I do. There's
Yeah.
no I mean, you know, I have to partition out like this much for podcasts and running and traveling, but how do you make those decisions?
You know, it's funny. I am really not organized in that way at all. So most of the people I know that have as much going on as I do, they are very regimented with their schedule, and they time block like crazy, and they have everything dictated out. I am 100% opposite of all of that. I'm literally one of those people. I have an overarching thing I need to get done today, and I just flow around through those things. And you know, I obviously make my appointment list and things that I need to do, meetings I need to have. But above and beyond that, it's like I just flow from one thing kind of into the next. And each day looks a little bit different, which is important to me. I love change, like we talked about.
Yeah.
So the variety side for me is every day has to look different, and I'm not doing the same thing every day, and that keeps me energized.
Yeah, I am 100% the same way. Like if it becomes predictable and redundant, I just check out mentally. That is not my gig. That's why I like CrossFit. I was like, just give me something different to do every time I work out. Because if I have to do the same thing every time, you know,
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither.
Yeah. So you grew up, what did you think you were going to do when you were growing up? Did you have big plans? Did things go exactly how you thought they would, or have things been different for you?
You know, it's funny. I think the one thing that has been consistent is the entrepreneur side of
Mm.
me. So when I was 8 years old, my mom was a candy merchandiser for Nabisco, and she would have to go to the stores and pull expired candy out. Well, she would bring it home instead of throwing it away.
Oh.
I used to get on the school bus every morning in the 6th grade with my little pen and paper, and I would make a list of what everybody wanted, and they would order the candy or the whatever that I knew my mom had, and I would sell it to them, and then I would distribute it the next day. And I started doing that. I got a lot of trouble for that. I think I was locked up for a couple of weeks because my mom could have lost her job because she was supposed to be throwing all of that away, but I was selling it to kids, and she had no idea I was smuggling it out of the house. And I had a whole box full of money, which I would then take down to the convenience store and buy my own candy.
Yeah.
But
What
at
you
either
wanted.
rate, yeah, exactly. So that was pretty much, so the entrepreneurial thread has been within me since the beginning. I spent 15 years working in commercial HVAC for a Fortune 50 company. And that was not enough variety, I think, in my life, because I always had kind of side gigs, flipping homes and helping out with community theater and doing that kind of stuff when I was working those jobs, until I kind of went all out on my own.
Yeah. Was that a scary leap for you, or you were so ready? It was like,
I was ready.
yeah,
I was so ready. I was so tired of somebody else telling me what to do.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's why most of us end up as entrepreneurs, because we don't want that. We don't like that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So going forward now, I'm curious, like with the housing market and everything that's happening with it. So we know a couple of years ago, the housing market went like this. Everybody jumped into real estate that I knew. I mean, I probably knew 5 people alone that decided to get their real estate licenses. And when it was good, it was really good. But now we're seeing, I think, a pretty big decline. And that's because there's no houses on the market anymore. There's very little inventory. What's
Yeah.
created that? They're just nobody's selling. They got it and they're done, or the economy. What's behind this?
Yeah, I think, right now I think interest rates are so high that if you don't have cash, you just don't want to spend the money
Mm,
that it's going to cost you to get a loan for property. The other piece of it too is that with all the things that are happening in the economy with the banks right now, it is a lot more difficult to get loans. It's a lot more difficult to get investment properties right now.
mm,
Most of the Airbnb community is a bit up in arms with what's going on with Airbnb itself. They've had a lot of regulatory issues. So some of that has slowed. There's a big influx in a lot of areas, oversaturation of the market for that type of housing as well. So that's kind of been a little bit of a shift. Now, I will say where I live, I'm right outside of Washington, D.C.
mm,
We don't see the same thing. We're kind of insulated because of the amount of government spending that happens around us. So our housing market is still very free flowing.
mm.
Something goes on the market and it's sold pretty much right away. In the multifamily universe, what you'll see is that because interest rates are so high, the bulk of the 25 to 40 somethings are still renting and not
Mhm.
because they can't afford to buy a house right now. So they're still renting. So as far as multifamily properties are concerned, those have become very popular because the rents are continuing to rise. So anytime you see interest rates increase the way they have, rents are also right there, right behind it, because they're very substantive. So people will continue to need to rent because they cannot afford to buy.
Yeah, because now they're holding pretty strong on that 20% down as well. And with the amount that housing is for somebody who's working, even a good job or 2 people to come up with that 20%, that's a
Yeah.
lot of money to come up with to even get into a house.
Yeah, and actually, in all honesty, with the rate of inflation in the last few years, the actual salary rates have not raised as much and to the same level as inflation has. So what's happening is the cost of everything, housing, gas, groceries, supplies, all of your basic needs have gone up at a higher percentage than what the salaries have actually increased at. So that's why people are really struggling to be able to afford those larger ticket items, cars, houses, all of those types of things.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And unfortunately, I don't think that's done. I think we're
No.
gonna keep seeing this trend for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. They say, I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago. We're really kind of in the middle of a winter still right now. So maybe another 6, 7 years of slower economic times before things kind of turn around and we get back into spring a little bit. So it's just a matter right now of stabilizing where you are and getting prepared for, capturing those moments when we get a little closer to things freeing up a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting with my business. We do better when the world is doing worse, and we do worse when everything is going great. And it's funny, like because I've been around long enough. We survived the 2007-8 crash. In fact, we did better than ever. And back then we didn't even take insurance. We took cash, and we still did better than ever. And, the whole world was in disarray for many years, but even at the beginning of the pandemic, we had tons of people coming in because it was like, might as well, go to rehab since everything else is going to heck. And then
Right.
last year, everything sort of seemed to like even out and everybody was doing good and the housing market was good. Or the last, year and a half. And definitely our numbers dipped. And now this year with everything starting to go into chaos again, everybody's like, okay, guess I might as well go to rehab.
Yeah, well, that's good. Use that financial system that we talked about and put all of that money away.
well, we're still waiting for it to come in because we also contend with insurance companies who like to keep our money because they make money on it. So even though we have the bodies coming in, the cash has not caught up yet. So that's going to be a whole learning curve of our seasonality. And then, of course, the writing these times out and being very aware of what the cycles are, which
Right.
is
Right.
interesting, and it's constantly changing. So you think you know how it goes, and then something happens within those organizations, and then it changes things for you, and you've got to quickly figure that out.
Oh boy.
Yeah, yeah. So there you go. There's that going on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's I think the amount of adjustments that you've made in your business is actually very impressive because you do have to constantly change and the focuses have been different across the map. So
Yeah, well, and when you have to appease so many different entities just to survive, between the state, the government, the insurance, the regulations, the mandate, like it's a constantly changing thing. There's a lot of
yeah,
regulation that other places don't have.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you had mentioned under regulation. Interesting that you brought that up. I want your perspective on this. So recently, my son and his fraternity, they went on spring break in Florida, and they rented several
Mm,
houses, and they uploaded their IDs. They rented the houses. Within a few hours of being at the houses, supposedly they got an anonymous tip, and the cop showed up and said, "Who here is over 25?" And they're like, "Well, none of us, but we're all over 21." They said, "No, the contract says you have to be over 25." And the boys who rented it are like, "But I uploaded my ID. I showed them everything. They knew how old we were." They're like, "We don't care." And so basically kicked them out within a couple hours of being there. And then the houses kept like $600 for cleaning fee and everything else, even though it was only a couple hours. And Airbnb decided to keep $2,000. They kept almost half of it for violation of their rules, even though they permitted it. And like, I was talking to my son about this. I'm like, you guys got to dispute it with the bank, blah, 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 like trying to help them out to get around this. Cause and I'd heard this was a scam that they were doing, but it just seems like such bad business practice. There was literally no reason they should do this. And like Logan was like, "Look, Mom, it was only like $130 for all of us." But I was like, "But still, that's not right. You got to stand up. It's the principle." And he's
yeah,
like, "I feel bad for the property owners because they had, a 5-day rentals, and they got one night or a few hours. So they're the ones getting screwed the most by Airbnb." And it seems to me like both sides are getting screwed. That's not Airbnb.
yeah. It's funny. I am a part of an Airbnb group, although I don't have any Airbnbs directly myself. All of my rentals are long term. But I am a part of an Airbnb group, and it has become a pretty large problem. So there are several different things going on in the Airbnb community. There are a lot of misuse of properties that then become claims later, either by the owner or the person who is doing the rental. And so Airbnb is caught in the middle with those, but they typically take a stance in air of the consumer as opposed to the owner of the property. And then in return, all of these opportunities for violations of the Airbnb rules have allowed Airbnb to retain a lot of those monies. So I almost feel like something is going on internally with Airbnb where they're not self-funding well. So they've
Mm.
tried to figure out a way to be able to close those gaps in the insurance claims that are going on within the Airbnb community. It's
Mm.
very interesting to watch, and it has definitely been a deterrent for me to do any short-term rentals via Airbnb. I do have over the years have gotten appreciation for doing off the grid type trips where you're not logged in, there's no Wi-Fi, you're going to a very rustic, more primitive type of place. I actually am in the process of putting together a site called Off the Grid Trips to help people who have properties like that be a listing, just to be a listing site, not an Airbnb. I don't want to be responsible for renting. I just want a community to be able to find a website that they can actually find properties on, and connect people together. But
I love that, because again, once it starts becoming so heavily regulated, and then they're trying to recoup their costs, but then everybody else pays a price, like this whole cleaning fee thing, where those prices
yeah,
have gone up exorbitantly, but they still want you to, do your own dishes, run the dishwasher, put them away, do the
yeah,
laundry. It's like, wait, why am I spending $275 for a cleaning fee where I'm doing all the cleaning? Like, what's the
yeah,
point?
yeah, yeah. To be honest with you, it in my opinion, it doesn't pay to be a property owner of a short-term rental right now at all.
Which is interesting, which is totally opposite of, the view just like a short year ago, which was go all in and make them all Airbnbs.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because obviously laws of supply and demand, right?
Right.
Once the areas became oversaturated with Airbnbs, then you're not renting out, at 70 to 85% capacity. So you don't have the rental amount coming in, and then you've got the increase in costs going on. Obviously, the people who clean Airbnb properties, they want to raise, right? So they want to charge more to go in and clean properties. It's just a very interesting dynamic. It will be interesting to see how it develops over the next couple of years.
Yeah, for me, I'm like, I just want to go back. I just go to hotels. It's just simpler. It's easy. I don't have to worry about any of this hidden weird stuff. They supply stuff. I don't have to clean it. Like, I don't have to be so careful. Like, I'm just going back to hotels. They have it all.
Yeah. Who wants to cook for yourself anyway? That's the only
not
positive
vacation.
part.
Yeah, that is not vacation.
No, I don't want to wash dishes on vacation.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my next question for you. Have you found it difficult to be a female entrepreneur? I know there's a lot of talk that goes around about how tough it is for females, which has not been my experience, but I'm curious as to if it's been yours.
So it's interesting. My degree from college is chemical engineering. So I was one of very few women in that program, and have always been a math and science kind of girl. So have always been kind of more of a minority in that process. And then when I went into my career with Carrier, I was one of maybe 3 women in the country doing what I did. I sold heavy chillers and designed HVAC systems, and most of the men were like, you don't know what you're doing. You're just a woman, right, in the business. So for 15 years, I spent proving myself and my brain and all of those things in that particular career. So when I got out on my own, I then chose another industry, the restaurant industry, that is predominantly run by men. And my restaurants are predominantly run by women, just happened that way naturally. I don't care if I have men or women, I just want good leaders. And that being said, so when you ask me that question, it's funny because my entire life has been that structure where I've been a woman kind of in a man's world, but I've always been closer to men than women. So for me, it's not been difficult, if that makes any sense.
Totally. That's how it's been for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But interesting for you that now you have, like in your restaurant business, a lot of women that work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I certainly didn't set out for it to be that way. I think, to be honest with you, I'm very tough. I might look very sweet and cute, but I'm super tough when it comes to business and dealing with employees. And so from that perspective, I don't know if men can really keep up with me. If I'm going to say that for real, I have had a few men in leadership roles in the restaurants, and the ones who were very masculine, they didn't make it for very long because they couldn't handle that. So I don't know. Maybe that's why I have more women around me.
Yeah, well, and I've known you prior to Evolve. I knew you in a different way. We were both members at Eds and Arte and this sort of stuff. I did see the amazing work you did for the Arte Meetup. But I didn't get to fully see Angela in effect until Evolve. And I saw you running that thing, and oh my God, it cracked me up because it was like, as a female CEO type individual, you can appreciate what it takes to be able to run a group of people and that sort of stuff. And yeah, you did not hold back. You would jam people up when they were late. You would call them on it. It was quite enjoyable for me to just not have to be that, but watch you be able to be that.
Yeah. It's funny. I will tell you, I got some feedback about that too from one person who came to, like, hey, I paid to come. If I want to be late, I'll be late. I'm saying, okay, then come in the back door. Like, don't interrupt everybody else. Come in the back
and
door.
Don't sit in the front and just be on your phone the whole time. Sit in the back so we don't have to watch that. Why are you here? Why are you here?
Don't be a distraction, for goodness sakes, At either rate, yeah, and I will tell you, over the years, I have kind of definitely worked on my delivery with those types of things, because I used to be really a hard ass about it. I'm a little bit softer about it now, but it was a good time wrangling all of those personalities over the 2 months prior to the event, and making sure they all got their jobs done. Yeah.
Well, the thing is you're also not just dealing with a big group of ordinary people. You're dealing
Yeah.
with a group of CEO entrepreneurs themselves who don't like to be told what to do by men or women. So, therein is a much bigger challenge as opposed to like my business where I have my 100 employees. There's not as much, people kicking back because they
Yeah.
understand the organization, but that's a totally different kind of thing.
No, I have to tell you, everybody was amazing, and they all played their role and did their part, and were very helpful in everything that transpired. And I will say that when I decided to put the event together, I did contact Marsha Hoffhines, and I said, Marsha, I need for you to do human design readings for the leadership team so that I know how to manage them, because I know how I can effectively manage myself, but I need to know how to effectively manage them so that I'm not coming at things from a way that's not going to be a good method for them. So that helped tremendously. So she actually did readings for the entire leadership team for me, and read us together and said, okay, Angela, I know you really well. I know your design. Here's where you might butt heads with this person. Here's where things will flow very nicely with this person. So that was all very helpful as well.
Yeah. So talk to me about that, because that's the first time I've ever been introduced to that. And I've been, Enneagrams, every kind of 16 core, like every kind of personality type test and reading I have information on, but this is one that I had no information on.
Yeah. So human design is actually really the base root of all of those different personality type tests, if you will. So human design doesn't ask any questions. It just wants your birth date, your time of birth, and your place of birth. It is literally your placement within the universe as the creator intended. And so you don't ask questions. So it doesn't matter what mood you're in. You're not impacted by how some question might be worded or not worded. It's literally only your date of birth, your time of birth, and place of birth. And it takes all of the I Ching, it takes all of the horoscope and astrology, it takes all of the things that have been created across history of time, and it solidifies all of it in who you are as a human being. And I found it when I met Marsha about 3 years ago, and she became my life coach. And that was one of the first things we did, was we read my human design chart, and it literally changed my approach to life. There were a lot of things that I was doing. For instance, so we talked earlier about whether or not I have time blocking or I'm regimented. That's actually not who I'm intended to be. Who I am intended to be is exactly as I show up now, just someone who free flows through what I've got to do and get done. The other piece of it too is that what I would find over the course of time is that when I would try different things that I wasn't responding to a need from someone, they never worked. It kind of never worked out. It would fall flat. It wouldn't really take off and do things. What I found out in my human design is that I am intended in this world to respond to the needs of others. And so Evolve is a primary example of that. There was a big need for people who needed help with implementation, who needed help like putting these concepts into play in their own lives. And when I saw that and started to conceptualize the event around it, it was impactful because it was responding to the needs of other people. That's what I'm here to do on this planet. And not everyone is here to do that. But once I found my thing, that's when things just flow. That's when they flow, and that's when they're successful. So human design taught me all of those things about myself.
I love that. And I love how you utilize it as a tool to assist yourself in managing others. Like that's a lot of thinking.
Yeah. Once I realized how much it impacted me, I actually hired Marsha to do readings for my entire leadership team at the restaurant. And we sat down as a group of 6. She ran everyone's chart. We sat down as a group of 6. We went through who each individual person was, how we might interact with each other. We did some role play and some work through some things. And it actually really impacted several of the people in my leadership team to be able to work better together. They had friction prior to, and then once they kind of learned about each other and what they were here to do and how to talk to each other, it made a huge difference in their ability to work together.
Oh, wow. That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
I might have to look into that. Although we've all worked together for like 20 years, so we kind of
doesn't matter.
We figured it out on our own. and it's changed a lot, because you know who you are when you're 20 is quite different than who you are when you're 40.
That's 100% the case.
Yeah. So you and we met in Arate, and we were both drawn to it because it was sort of that thing that we were looking for. Tell me about that. Like what did that look like? What got you into it? And then what changed in your life because of it?
So it's interesting. COVID obviously was very difficult for me in the restaurant business. And I had met a friend during COVID that had introduced me to ANGIE. And so I started listening to the MFCEO podcast and Real AF. And then I kind of learned about Arte, and I didn't really know what it really was. But I knew that here locally where I live, I didn't have the entrepreneurial network that I wanted. There are a lot of people here who are great business leaders and they're great entrepreneurs, but they're in similar industries to mine, and they're not pushing the envelope. You know, they're not continually trying to improve themselves personally and their businesses, and also how to help the community and so I never really found anyone here that kind of looked and felt like me. There are one or two that I've become close to that are here locally that look and feel like me, but Arte gave me kind of that outlet to say, oh, well, I wonder what these people across the country are like. And then I researched and saw the core values of Arte. And then I learned a little bit more about Ed as well, because I really didn't know much about him either. And so when I joined, I primarily just listened to the monthly calls and wasn't very engaged. And then one day I woke up and I was like, I'm kind of missing the boat. What about all these other people? I really wanted to make my network larger. What about the people? And that was when I kind of decided to get a little bit more engaged. And then I didn't have money to go to the summit the first year. And so I put 1% away. And then 10 months later, I had money to go. And that's where you and I met for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's so different. Like I look at, the first one, which I guess it was called the summit, but then the live compared to Nashville. So the summit, you only have a very close, maybe 100 to 200 people. It's small, it's more intimate. You get to know each other. But then fast forward to the live last year at Nashville. Oh my gosh, I was like 2,000 like Arte people in one location. This is crazy. It was so cool. You could not possibly meet or see everybody for myself, all the people that I had connected to over the last few years. And then the realization of how many people that I had connected to over the 2 years that, like I said, I couldn't even see all of them within that 2-day span.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's the amount of energy, even from the summits, even from the 150 people, to sit in the same room with your own energy for that period, 2-3 day period of time, really is transformative. It is, because you really don't feel like you're alone anymore. You might go back to your life and you might feel like you're a little alone and you're working through your problems and you're doing the things, but now you've got a network of people you can call. They're like, hey, that's the energy I've got. Let me reach out to that to pull from when I'm down. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I've found so valuable about it is any situation I have, I consult the network. Like, hey guys, I need a CFO. Oh, here's like 5 that come highly recommended. And we work with them personally. The one I just hired, I'm super excited about. He's the CFO AF. I'm like, well, how could I not get along with them? This is perfect. But literally anything. Yeah, Christopher Warner is another one. I'm like, I need a graphic design. Can anybody help me with my podcast logo? And, instantly there was all kinds of recommendations. And I found that, the recommendations within the group, because we all care about the group and our reputation within the group, we don't steer people wrong, take advantage of them, or lead them down bad paths. So it's almost like, it's like a 5-star Yelp review if you're getting a referral from within the group.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's been great.
Yeah. So are you looking forward to the next event? We're only like a month away.
I'm excited. I enjoy the night before, and I enjoy that process now. And then I enjoy being in that room and getting that energy. I'm excited to go to the venue that we're having in St. Louis, because it looks like a pretty cool place to sit for a day and absorb all of that.
Who do we think the speaker's going to be? They're being very elusive.
I don't know. I'm curious too. I heard some rumors that it's not going to be a bunch of authors like last time. That it might be some other folks. So I don't know. Maybe we'll have some athletes. I don't
I'm
know.
thinking Goggins. I think
Maybe.
for some reason I feel like he's coming back out. He would be the perfect fit.
Well, it's good timing too with his new book, right? So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going on record. I said David Goggins. Let's see if I'm right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see if you're right.
I mean,
Let's
I
see if
would
you're
love
right.
Tom Brady. You know, Tom Brady has retired, so I would not be opposed to that either.
Well, it's
Yeah.
not, it wouldn't be that far off.
No.
So
Yeah, that's exciting. So let's see. Tell me something else about yourself that nobody else knows or that you don't talk about very often.
let's talk about something that connects to you that we
Ooh,
haven't talked about.
okay.
So one of my brothers has been an addict his whole life. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is still currently struggling?
Mm-hmm.
How do
Yeah.
you contend with that? You know, I assume to some degree you're kind of normal. I just put people who aren't addicts as normal people. How do you contend with that all these years later?
It's interesting. So my father has 4 children from his first marriage, and then he has myself and my sister from my mom. And so his original 4 children are older than I am by at least, I guess, 10 years. The youngest, who is an addict, he 10 years older than me. And so I don't remember a lot of growing up together. We lived in the same house when I was younger, until my parents separated when I was 8. And my father, I love him. He really doesn't want to see any of his children suffer. And so my brother, he really has, kind of a codependent relationship in helping to make sure that he sort of stays out of trouble. But in that process has definitely kind of enabled my brother to live the life that he's lived. So the struggle I have is not so much with my brother and the choices that he's made in his life, but really more watching my dad and the impact that has on you as a parent when you see your children in that type of situation and there really just isn't anything that you can do. And so I just try to be empathetic with my dad and what he's going through. And to be honest, I don't have a relationship with my brother. I haven't for a long time, just because he's had many, many opportunities with rehab. He's been to rehab at least a dozen or more times. He has overdosed probably 3 or 4 times
Wow.
over the course of his life. Yeah. It is amazing actually that he's still alive. But kind of the pain that he's caused my dad has been more of the part that for me to contend with, more than kind of anything else. But it's not something I understand well, even though I have, a sibling that has gone through the trauma of being addicted to substance abuse. But I don't know. I reconciling it for myself is kind of, it's like it's not my job, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's been hard to watch my dad go through everything he's gone through with it.
I love that it hasn't changed your relationship necessarily, and I could be wrong, with your dad, because I know with other people, when there's a parent that enables the addict, the rest of the family can get very bitter, resentful, and it affects the relationship that they have with the parent. So it seems like for you, that's not the case. In fact,
It's been the case over time. It's been up and down.
Yeah.
I am by no means a saint with that in that regard. I mean, I have been, tough on my dad about that throughout the years in certain instances, but it would never, my father had, in the beginning of 2020, right before COVID, He had a very bad case of pancreatitis, and he was in a coma for a couple of months. And actually, prior to that,
A couple of months he was in a coma?
Oh yeah, he was in a coma for a couple of months, and he was in the hospital for a total of 11. And then
Wow.
I rehabbed him at my house for a couple of months before he was able to be back on his own. And so during that time before he got sick was one of those times where we were like off again. You know, my dad and I are on again, off again, you know. So we were having an off again moment because of things that he had chosen to do in his life, and then some things that my brother had chosen to do and impact my father. And so we were kind of having an off again moment. And when I got the word, it didn't matter. Like it didn't matter for me where we were in our relationship. Like he needed me and I needed to be there and do for him, you know, to help him get his life back. And so one thing is for sure, while I have my opinions and I'm no saint, and I certainly share my opinions with him about all of that, like at the end of the day, it's not going to change whether I'm there for him or not when he needs me. So
that's good. Obviously, you put him in your house and convalesced him for a few months. Was that good for you? Was it like a good bonding time?
You know, it's funny. It was a good bonding time. It was good to have him with my kids. So I have two girls, 17 and 12. And so it was good to have him with them and for them to have some close time, because otherwise we've been fairly distant, you know, over time. We keep in touch, but didn't see each other a lot, that type of thing. He lived 4 hours away. So it was good for them to be able to connect with him in that regard. Yeah. And since then, in the last September, he actually moved up closer to us, and we got a place for him. And so he's living only a few miles from us. So we see him a lot more now. But yeah, it was a good time to kind of bring us back together. Although I won't say that I'm not hard on him like I am everybody else. So.
Well, it would be weird if you weren't. You're just like this totally demure side with your dad. Like, yeah, I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, no, he gets it. You know, it's funny because when you go through pancreatitis like that and you are bedridden for 7 or 8 months, you lose all your muscle mass. You lose all of your eating addictions as well, because he was on nutrition, you know, through a tube for a long time. Right. So you lose all of that. And so he actually came out of it after 10 months, much healthier than he was when he went in. And so he had, you know, a lot of shaking and symptoms of different other issues that all went away. It was like his body just totally reset, everything reset in that time. And so I was very hard on him after he was here at my house, because he went back to his old eating ways. And then I decided, you know what, Angela, for God's sake, he's 78 years old. Just let him live his life. If he's only here for a few more years, at least it's a few more years past, you know, the time that he got sick and he got a little bit of his life back. So bless you. Bless you.
But I would say that there is no bigger frustration than to see somebody not caring for themselves and creating conditions in their life that are completely unavoidable. And of course, addiction falls right into that, but it also translates to, you know, health as well. It's just very frustrating when people don't care enough to do what it takes to not be in these conditions.
Yeah, it is. You're 100% right. It is. And my initial reaction is always to get aggravated by it. Yes. And I did a very poor job for a long time of not allowing that frustration to bother me. And I'm not perfect now, but I'm much better than I was. I mean, bottom line, like we started out this whole conversation, bottom line is that I internally have to get right with me and where I am before I can do anything else. And so some of those frustrations were about that bitterness, about some of those childhood wounds, about some of those things, and then I'm projecting them outwardly. And so, you know, in the last couple of years, I really have learned that I have to do better for me, not for them, but for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think like you, like me, so many of us it's a lifelong journey, right? But as long as we're continuing to grow, change, build, keep working on ourselves. I mean, I'm going through stuff now with the work that I'm doing where I'm like, I handled that so long ago. I've handled that like 5 times. Why is it coming up again? There's just layers and depth and things happen and different roles. And so, as long as I continue to look at it as a lifelong journey of learning, and as long as I'm doing the work, then I'm able to give myself some grace, I think, about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. And you obviously doing the same. I see all your personal development books in the back. Like,
Oh
I think
yeah.
that's and I know it's a premise of Arte, right? Is just constant
Yeah.
learning, constant growing, constantly doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough. I just went to Reno and I got to see my grandparents who are still alive at 94. And one of the things that they'd been kind of hush hush about is that my grandpa was having kidney failure. And so I just kind of sat at their house with them for a couple hours, just sort of fly on the wall, but just chatting. And I would just sort of slyly like to tell my grandfather, like, hey, you got to drink more water, Gramps, like your kidneys need water. You're not drinking enough water. Oh, I know. I just hate it. I have to pee all the time. And I'm like, dude, I get it. That's why most of us don't like to drink so much water. Try drinking a gallon a day. He's like, you
Yeah.
drink a gallon a day? I'm like, yeah. So let's just work on 2 8-ounce glasses. Like maybe you could look at it that way. But with him at his age, you can see maybe he's starting to go, do I even care anymore? Do I want to put in the work, or am I done? And it's interesting to see. And it's 100% acceptable to see somebody at 95 years old sort of going through that, but
Yeah.
to give him the grace to be in charge of his own body, because I know his like my mom and some of the other siblings get very frustrated because they expect more out of him. They expect him to try harder and do more. And I just kind of constantly try to tell him, like, give him some grace to be, in charge of his own body and his decisions, and
Yeah.
understand where he's at. Like most people don't live that long. So let's be a little empathetic here.
Yeah. 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 And that's exactly the same struggle that I went through and continue to go through with my dad.
Yeah.
Same, then I have to remind myself, well, he did almost die, and he did spend 11 months in the hospital, and now he has an opportunity to have a few more years, and he's more than fit to figure out what he wants to do with his few more years. It's not my job to tell him,
Oh, it's so hard though. Because we're such
I
fixers.
know.
Like we just want to fix it.
Yes.
We're fixers and we're used to running things. So we just like want to control them like we would like, somebody who worked for us.
Yes. It's like I don't write him a paycheck, but I feel like I should.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that this morning, just generationally, just how different it is, right? So like you have my grandparents' generation, they were beyond tough love. It was like survive or die. There was not like a lot of, touchy feely emotion, help you. It was like, you do this or you're not going to make it. And then like with my mom's generation, she more raised me with that tough love sort of, accountability, responsibility, which I appreciate. But now it seems like this newer generation, it's the pendulum has swung almost completely opposite, where we understand everything and feel your emotions and go through this. And it's quite different than what we were raised as.
Yep. That's 100% true. And I also feel like my parents' generation, there was not a comfort level in self-development or in personal development. And there was no, you didn't talk about those things. You mean, you don't talk about emotion, you don't talk about money, you don't talk about like, you do your thing, and you don't talk about that stuff. It's taboo. And so, there's a lot of things that you and I probably didn't learn from our parents exactly for that reason, because it just was like, no, you don't do that. Why would you do that? Why would you talk to someone about your problems?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was definitely bad. And if you did, there was something wrong with you. Like if you admitted you were seeing a counselor or a therapist or something, it was like, oh, that's a sign of weakness. And then I thought about it. It's like, have I ever seen my mother cry? Like I know that I only found my grandmother crying one time. She was trying to hide it. And I, being a curious kid, I came across her, and of course it shook me, but I was like, no wonder I have such issues with crying. Like literally that was not modeled for us. In fact, if you cried, you were weak. And so it was like boys or girls, it didn't matter.
Yep.
That was just like the feeling. And so we suppressed emotions like no other.
Yep. Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. So luckily for us, though, we live in a society now which embraces that, almost encourages it. And so we can delve into the more um, emotional side of our feminine
Yeah,
side of ourselves.
that's right. That's right. Somewhere in here, there's some of that.
That's part of the journey, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Angelie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate our conversation. And if our listeners want to reach out to you, which I highly recommend, if you want help with your business, with the finances, Angela is the pro on that. She's actually going to help me out with my team and implementing some new slash old strategies that kind of, we threw the baby out with the bathwater on, and I'm excited to work with you on that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me today. I really enjoyed it as well. And it's so good to see your beautiful face on screen as well.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you've done for me. You've been a shining light through these months. I really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you as well.
Awesome. So we'll put your stuff in the headline in the things, but they
Oh,
can
yeah.
find you on
Sure.
Instagram, on Facebook.
Yep, Instagram, Facebook. Instagram is Ms. Angela Goodman, and that's probably the best place to find me. And then all of my other handles are on there. So,
Awesome. Cool. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the show, and I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
All right, sounds good. I'm excited. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks.